You've seen them without really looking. Pull into a truck, stop off the interstate at 10 at night, and there's a wall of them. 50, 60 semis backed into every space. Curtains drawn across the little windows behind the cab. Somebody is in there, living. That driver hasn't slept in a bed at home in 2 weeks, maybe 3. Their whole life fits inside a box smaller than a prison cell, bolted behind a diesel engine. And here's the strange part. Most of them didn't fully choose it. So how does a person actually live inside a truck for weeks without going home? Where do they shower? Where do they sleep when every space is already taken? The easy answer is money, and that part is real, but it's nowhere near the whole story. The real answer runs through a federal law written after a man was murdered, a nationwide shortage nobody voted for, and a machine engineered to be a house that isn't allowed to stop moving. And you'll realize the answer has been sitting in your own home all week, inside something you bought without a second thought. But let's start with what everyone gets wrong about that little space behind the seat. The old image is a cramped seat and a driver slumped over the wheel with a jacket for a pillow. That hasn't been the reality for decades. Behind the front seats of a modern long-haul truck is a sleeper cab, and calling it a bunk undersells it badly. Step into a good one, and you're standing in a studio apartment that does 65 miles an hour. A real mattress, sometimes 2 stacked for teen drivers who trade off and keep the truck rolling around the clock. A mini fridge with a week of food, a microwave, outlets running off power inverters so a driver can charge a laptop and watch TV in bed. Better trucks carry their own heating and cooling so nobody has to burn diesel all night just to stay warm. It is, in every functional sense, a house. A tiny, rolling, one-room house. And that's exactly why the obvious explanation falls apart. Here's the thing that little house can't give you. It can't give you a shower. No bathroom, no running water, no drain. So the driver's real bathroom is a truck stop 40 minutes up the road where a shower runs $10 to $15 or comes free if you buy enough fuel. Their laundry is a row of coin machines at a Pilot or a Love's. Their gym, their dining room, their living room, scattered across truck stops they might never see twice. The house moves. The plumbing doesn't come with it. So the space makes sense as survival gear, not luxury. But a comfortable bunk explains how a driver survives one night. It doesn't explain the weeks. Why eat microwave dinners and shower in a stranger's stall for 20 days straight when home is right there on the map? The answer is that most of them aren't choosing it at all. Something else is making that decision for them. And it's written into federal law. Picture a load moving from a warehouse in Los Angeles to a distribution center outside Atlanta. Roughly 2,200 miles. Now, lay the rule on top of it. Federal hours of service law lets a long-haul driver drive a maximum of 11 hours a day, and only inside a 14-hour window that starts the moment they clock on. Hit either limit, and they're legally finished. Not tired finished. Finished. The truck cannot legally move another inch until they've taken 10 straight hours off duty. Run the math on that Atlanta load, and it's 3 days minimum, and only if nothing goes wrong. A coast-to-coast run can eat most of a week one direction. So here's the trap. The driver physically cannot get home between loads because home isn't on the route, and the clock won't let them detour 1,000 miles to visit it. And they can't check into a motel every night either. It would cost more than many drivers earn and strand the truck far from anywhere built to handle an 18-wheeler. Therefore, the truck stops being a convenience. It becomes the only home that keeps the freight and the paycheck moving. That mandatory 10-hour break is the whole reason the bunk exists. The law doesn't just allow drivers to sleep in their trucks. For anyone running real distance, it quietly requires it. And this touches something sitting in your kitchen right now. The produce in your fridge almost certainly crossed the country with a driver who slept beside it every night. But we'll come back to that. Because now we've reached the real problem, the one almost nobody outside trucking ever thinks about. If a driver is legally forced to stop after 11 hours, wherever they happen to be, then every night they have to answer one brutal question. Where do you park an 80,000-pound truck to sleep? It sounds trivial. It's the single hardest part of the job. And the reason traces back to a man who pulled into an empty gas station in 2009 and never drove out. His name was Jason Rivenberg, 35, a New York driver hauling milk to a Food Lion distribution center in South Carolina. He got there early, and the receiver wouldn't let him wait on their lot. 12 miles from the drop, with nowhere legal or safe to stop, he pulled into an abandoned gas station for the night. A local man had been watching. He hid under the trailer, waited for Jason to fall asleep, then shot him and took the $7 in the cab. His body wasn't found for days. 13 days after the murder, his widow gave birth to twins. His death forced a fact into the open that the public had never registered. There aren't enough places for trucks to legally park in America. The most recent national count put the total at roughly 313,000 spaces in the entire country. That's about one space for every 11 drivers who need one. In a federal survey of nearly 12,000 drivers, 98% said they regularly struggle to find safe parking. Not occasionally, regularly. The average public rest area holds around 19 trucks, and it fills up hours before dark. So think about what that forces. Watching the clock wind down, a driver knows that if they burn every legal minute, every space will be gone by the time they stop. Therefore, they quit early on purpose, sometimes an hour early, just to claim a spot before it disappears. That one habit burns thousands of paid miles a year, roughly $5,000 to $7,000 out of each driver's own pocket, spent not on rest, but on the hunt for a space. And the ones who gamble and lose end up exactly where Jason did. An off-ramp, a shoulder, a dark, empty lot. Jason's widow spent 3 years fighting Congress, and in 2012, Jason's law finally put federal money towards safe parking. More than a decade later, the shortage is still ranked the number 2 crisis in all of trucking. The danger that killed him is still out there every night. Therefore, what you're about to see is how all of this reaches into your own life, whether you've ever touched a truck or not. Start with the human cost, because that's the part that stays hidden. Weeks alone in a metal box, showering in strangers' stalls, bargaining every night for a safe place to close your eyes. It grinds people down in a way the pay rarely makes up for. Long-haul trucking has some of the highest turnover of any job in America. At the big carriers, the churn runs near 90% in a single year, and more than a third of new drivers wash out inside their first 3 months. The average driver is pushing 50, and not enough young ones are lining up behind them, because most people take one look at 3 weeks away from home and walk. And the uncomfortable part researchers keep finding is that for the companies, this pencils out. Paying drivers less and replacing the ones who quit costs less than paying enough to keep them. The churn is the business model working as designed. And now we're about to see precisely how all of this lands in your daily life. Look around whatever room you're in. The phone in your hand, the chair under you, the coffee you drank this morning, the food in your kitchen. Nearly all of it spent part of its journey in the back of a truck, which means it spent that journey with a person living in the front of it. That gallon of milk, like the one Jason was hauling. The out-of-season fruit that has no business being ripe in your city in winter. The package that hit your porch 2 days after you tapped a button. Every one of them moved because somebody gave up their own bed, their own bathroom, their own family dinners for weeks at a stretch and slept in a parking space they were lucky to find. So here's where you actually land. You pulled into that truck stop and saw a row of parked trucks with the curtains drawn. You thought you were looking at drivers grabbing a nap or burning fuel for no reason. What you were actually looking at was a fleet of one-room houses that aren't allowed to stop moving. Each one wrapped around a person kept from their own bed by a federal clock and a country that never built enough places for them to safely sleep. The comfortable bunk, the early stop to fight for a space, the law named after a murdered man that still hasn't fixed the problem. It's all one system, and it runs on people trading away weeks of their lives so your shelves stay full. That hum in the dark parking lot was never laziness or waste. It's the sound of the machine that stocked your fridge, carried your packages, and put winter fruit on your table, idling while the person who made it happen tries to get some sleep. You're not just looking at parked trucks. You're looking at where a huge share of your daily life comes from, and the people who live inside it. And if you think living in a truck for weeks is strange, wait until you find out what happens to the freight itself, and why so much of what you buy survives a 2,000-mile trip at exactly 34 degrees without ever spoiling.